Hey,
We got the rules.
okay,
Hey,
talk.
there we go.
We can hear.
Okay, now we hear you.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, it
Welcome.
just took me a moment.
No worries.
And I'll turn myself down just a little bit as I get into my setup for the presentation. For those of you not familiar with me, my name is David Felton. I'm otherwise known as Hiturunk. I'm a Uniswap protocol politician and the founder of a startup called Penguin Party. I've worn a lot of hats in life. I'm a self-taught programmer, a musician, a visual artist, a writer, and generally I like to think of myself as a very creative person. I've been a user of computers since 1998 when I was 4. I began taking an interest in programming in my preteens. I'm the first and maybe the last of a generation that grew up not just as a native to digital technology, but of free and open offline computing. I've used every operating system from DOS to now. I taught myself to read and write on a computer before I could talk. So I've definitely had a background in computers since I was really young. I'm passionate about computers, and I'm passionate about what Steve Jobs wanted to do when he handed personal computers to everyone across the world as a free and open technology to drive innovation. So I would like to get into who I am a little bit and how it led into my position as the startup founder of Penguin Party. But before I do that, I'd like to ask if you have any questions, CD. I kind of gave you the presentation a little bit beforehand.
Yeah. I'm sure I will as the presentation goes on. So I'll just go ahead and interrupt you when things come to mind. How about that?
That sounds like a plan. Yeah, I don't want to kind of go on a monologue forever. I want it to be an engagement and a dialogue.
You seem like an engaging speaker, so don't stress.
I appreciate that. Personally, myself, I hate monotony. I'm always looking for change. I'm from a small, rural, and poor southern state, but I grew up moving all across America. And I've lived in a lot of places: California, Colorado, Michigan, Louisiana, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida. For you Europeans, it would be like saying you grew up having lived in every country in Europe. I'm 26, and for my entire adult life, I've been constantly at work in low-paying, labor-intensive jobs. My usual hourly is less than $15 an hour. I've scrimped and saved and worked my way slowly up to financial independence. When the coronavirus hit, unlike most millennials my age, I had a moderate amount of money to live on. I have not worked since last October, and yet I still have over $10,000 to my name. And I don't say these things to brag. I say this to illustrate something important and intrinsic about myself. I was molded by the 2009 financial crisis that led to the creation of Bitcoin. In it, I watched as the rug was pulled out from under good, honest, and hardworking Americans like my parents, who were small business owners before the recession, and who lost everything: their homes, their businesses, their cars, and ultimately my parents lost something far more important in the recession: their marriage. While the greedy bankers who caused the recession got bailed out because they were too big to fail, the common man lost what little he had. Too small to survive is what I called it. The financial crisis made me realize the common man was under attack.
So your parents' marriage fell out as a result of an economic crisis that was affecting your family.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. And crypto, as you're about to discuss, kind of like laid a path out for you to a level of financial security in your personal life that you didn't have before.
Right. And philosophically, it aligned with this mission I have to separate government from banking. The central banks should not regulate currencies, and it's not the job of government to regulate currency. The Constitution of the United States of America says that no tender of anything but gold and silver will ever be made payable. for public debts. This basically means that we've been operating illegally with the central banks and the fiat currency schemes for around 100 years now. And it's been an unsuccessful program. We've had countless recessions since the Federal Reserve was instituted to control monetary policy. So this led to me getting into crypto. This was a pretext in my life for crypto. I joined the crypto community in 2012, back when Bitcoin could still reasonably be mined on a computer chip or a graphics card. I became politically obsessed by the anti-fiat central bank ideals that Satoshi Nakamoto espoused and the anger he felt at the recession in his early postings on Hacker News. I was a victim of the hack of Mt. Gox, and I was also affected by the closure of GLBSE, which was the Global Bitcoin Stock Exchange. It was an early exchange. It was ahead of its time. It was a place to transact these kind of ERC20 tokens before even such a thing existed. These things put off my interest in crypto for a number of years. It wasn't until mid-2017 that I actually re-entered crypto, and this time as a miner of Ethereum. I saw a second chance to get back in on something that was going to explode.
And did you mine Bitcoin back in the day? Or
I did.
With Ethereum? Okay.
My losses in Mt. Gox now are somewhere in the hundreds of thousands, probably $300,000 a Bitcoin or so.
That's rough, man.
It was a lesson about trusting centralized exchanges to reserve your funds, and trusting a Magic the Gathering trading card website to hold your funds in Japan.
That's fair.
And when the bankruptcy of Mt. Gox happened, I learned an important lesson about foreign finance, and that is that it's extremely difficult to deal with the laws of another country. Bankruptcy laws for the Japanese are completely different laws than in America. And that's not apparent to you when you're young, and it's not apparent to you, maybe when you're just transacting one ERC20 to another, or even sometimes buying shares of a company, that these companies might be entities in another government, sometimes in communistic governments where the state could nationalize the entire industry overnight.
This reminds me of what we were talking about just before, Ali, about how on-chain organizations can secure finances, for example, from the kind of arbitrary, what becomes really the arbitrary tyranny of competing international economic systems, financial systems.
Right.
So the nation is going to be able to nationalize Ethereum, for example.
I think that Ethereum is the network, a global decentralized network that all countries can transact through. It's a medium that's not controlled by anyone, and that's its fundamental value and purpose. And so after I got back into Ethereum, I got into it at just the right time. During the 2017 bull run, the first real investment of my life paid off. The graphics cards I had bought to mine ETH turned a good profit. During those times, I learned the basics of Solidity and experimented with Ethereum. I deployed test contracts at the time. I learned the general cursory ideas of how Ethereum operated in 2017. And I learned a lot. I earned good money. I got lucky enough to sell the top, over $1,000 in ETH. After the decline from the all-time highs, I spent the next few years working, minimum wage jobs. I mined as a hobby, mostly to secure the network. And I accumulated what ETH I could. I bought a lot of my ETH at $200 or $300 in ETH. This is my first time as a founder, as somebody that's trying to be a leader and move a project forward on my own. At this point, my original co-founders left the project, and it's mostly me that is pushing it forward. Penguin Swap, as an example, that you guys are familiar with, was something I developed overnight. and by myself on a whim. From 2017 to now, I've mostly been a quiet participant in the Ethereum and DeFi communities. Once before, I attempted to start a startup, but never really had brought any of my ideas that I had to fruition. This is my first time as a startup founder and as a lead developer, and it has been extremely interesting. It was a leap that I was forced to make to adapt to these changes in the political and economic conditions of the world. Admittedly, were it not for the coronavirus and the economic situation, I would still be cooking in a restaurant or waiting tables or answering questions about your credit report as a representative for a company like Experian, which was my previous position. I think what we're dealing with all year long, we've heard entirely too much about it, and I don't want to make it the focus of my presentation, but it has a lot to do with what I believe about freedom. I want to talk about the Great Reset. The state of the economy has become intolerable. The world leaders are gathering again in Davos this coming May to discuss and finalize their plans in line with Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset Initiative of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum to forcibly confiscate the last of our wealth, forcibly close our businesses by decree, and to purposefully and intentionally erode the national sovereignty of the free and independent nations of the earth, a continuation of what we've seen all year. The forcible extermination of all small business and the takeover by these large mega corporations that are multinational corporations. If the EU tries to regulate them, they run to Asia. If the Asians try and regulate them, they run to America. If the Americans try and tax and regulate them, they run somewhere else. They're multinational corporations that have become more powerful than governments. And Facebook and the Libra currency are a great example of this. These corporations have taken aspirations of total monopolistic control of the economy. Walmart can stay open, but your local store cannot. And I think that this legislation that forces these things is dangerous, and it erodes our democracy. It erodes our right to protest. It erodes our rights to run a business. The government cannot tell anyone, in my opinion, that they have to close their business or that they cannot serve customers, and especially not without some form of compensation. And that's what's been happening all year. So no matter what country you're from, I'm sure you are as fearful as the rest of us about the state of affairs in international politics and the virus which sweeps now throughout the world. But I'm here with good news. We're in the midst of the most amazing technological change in human history, the fourth industrial revolution, blockchain technology. And I'm trying to slide to my next slide here. This year was one of the strangest of my life, and I'm sure we all feel the same way. We're winning our revolution. The fiat money systems have all begun to collapse. The banks are insolvent, and here in America, they've lowered the reserve rate, the amount that the banks are required to hold of your funds, to 0%, because the banks are insolvent. And those who dictate the legislation of our countries have, by emergency decree, rushed to try to repurpose the worldwide coronavirus pandemic to their advantage by pushing forward legislation to reset the global financial system. Cryptocurrency is the cure to these corrupt old world systems. We are winning our financial war. Now we must relearn what it means to govern and to labor in a new age, and we must adapt to a new way of doing things. My journey to found Penguin Party began much earlier than even I realized. Another speaker at the conference who is speaking tomorrow, Metagame, was hugely inspirational to me. I joined the project in a fun and meta way by fixing the first onboarding quest at the time with a GitHub PR. And I'll link the GitHub PR, and I can link you the presentation if anybody wants to read back through it. But Metagame woke me up to a stunning realization. We are all unknowingly playing the metagame, the infinite and oxymoronically collaborative competition to develop, create, build, and reap the rewards of our infinite capacity for labor. But it was not until sometime after I began playing the metagame that I created my first real quest, Penguin Party. And pardon me, I'm just making sure I could hear myself. The most valuable form of labor mankind can contribute is creativity, and so many of us have for so long been disincentivized from our natural childlike desire to mold reality and to follow our dreams. Pardon me, I had multiple windows open there. So many of us have for so long been disincentivized from our natural childlike desire to mold reality and to follow our dreams. When are people at their most creative? When are we our most productive? The answer is obvious, right? When we play, we can fix everything that is wrong with our world now if we can collectively realize this true potential within ourselves. When we enjoy what we do, we are more productive. When the incentives are aligned, systems function. And that's a key concept of what Penguin Party is. It's gamification of software development. Penguin Party is a decentralized protocol politician. Users delegate votes to Penguin Party and or its representatives who act according to the vote of Penguin Party's governance token, Penguin Party Fish. No one person controls all the governance power. Penguin Party is a software development collective. Developers flesh out ideas created in and by governance. In return, the developers earn fish from the treasury in the form of development grants and other incentives. And Penguin Party is finally a community. Users, developers, and stakeholders cooperate through an alignment of incentives to develop open source technology and govern protocols. So what do we mean when we say that we want to gamify software development? It's really quite simple. By minting a governance token and distributing it to open source code contributors, you incentivize development and create an emergent economy of labor. This is the first real model for free market open source software development. Software not created and owned by corporations, but by emergent communities of real people with aligned incentives. And it's not just software that can be gamified, it's all behavior. Say Penguin Party wants to expand its marketing. It could run a mission, something as simple as saying the first 10 users to post on Twitter get an OG badge NFT, can have a stunning amount of success at engaging the community. My platform as a protocol politician was really simple. When I first ran as a protocol politician before creating Penguin Party, I outlined 3 pillars of my platform: returning value to stakeholders, incentivizing decentralization of the protocol, and funding further development. Penguin Party was accidental, totally. Aren't the best things usually that way? When the Uniswap airdrop happened, I saw a distinct opportunity to have a say in something I cared deeply about: freedom, privacy, decentralization, and of course, at the center of it all, Uniswap, the rarest kind of unicorn, an emblem of freedom and trustlessness in an increasingly tech giant dominated world. Uniswap is critical infrastructure for DeFi and Web 3.0. Developing and protecting it is of paramount importance to the entire Ethereum economy. So I jumped in and ran as a protocol politician. At one point, I had over 1 million uni delegated to my address. I realized suddenly that this was too much power for one person to wield. I needed at least 2 others to run a multi-sig to ensure the votes were used in accordance with the voters' wishes, to protect the democracy of Uniswap. I created Fish and gave it to every voter so they could use a snapshot vote to direct me on how they wanted me to vote with their uni. And slowly, Penguin Party began to take shape. Earlier, I outlined kind of these 3 principles of my platform, and I believe in a really short amount of time, we've accomplished 2 of these goals. Firstly, we incentivized the decentralization of the protocol when we opposed Uniswap proposals 1 and 2, which, if you guys remember, was Dharma trying to change the governance parameters, the quorum and such. No change to governance succeeded, and Uniswap remains free and sovereign with the original governor contract and quorum. And more importantly, our championed goal of funding further development of Uniswap has manifested itself in Uniswap Proposal 3 to create a Uniswap development grants architecture, which is really what I've been saying since the beginning. The most fundamental thing to spend the treasury on is to develop Uniswap and to develop integrations and reward developers who are contributing to Uniswap.
But when the Dharma proposal happened, and you had so many unis with your delegate, did that put you in the top 5 or even higher of most powerful delegates?
Yeah, I was definitely pretty far up there. I think I was in about 4th or 5th place.
Wow, that's some legit power, dude. That's a very interesting experience to go through.
It was. And it made me realize how quickly just one single individual can have a scary amount of power accumulated into them, and why decentralization of this process is important. Having a political party-like structure with multiple co-delegates.
Mm-hmm.
Through the plethora of tools in our toolkit, Penguin Party is able to interact with governance and experimentally develop improvements for Uniswap's end users. I believe we, as developers with Fish, as well as other social tokens like Metagame Seed Token and equity tokens such as Biddle, have successfully demonstrated that open source governance token software development model works. That is to say that we can raise capital with these tokens and we can build software. It works. Developers will congregate around it and users will congregate around it. And as we build these protocols in these Legos, they plug into each other and they're reusable. Just like in the last presentation we were having, you were talking about the modularity of different components and reusing those components. And that's what these open and free protocols are all about, is being able to plug in these Legos from one application to another application, and for it to be seamless.
Yeah, can I ask you something? I think these things is one of the most important things because it's basically the weapon that we have as Ethereans to fight the corporate capture of Ethereum and the economic incentive that the corporate capture have. So, what's your position about this idea?
Well, I certainly think that we should do everything we can to prevent mega corporations and governments from having undue control over DeFi, Ethereum, or any of these infrastructure improvements we're trying to build, like cross-protocol bridges. I think that corporations that are pioneers in this space, that are allies of ours against the central banks, are adding value to our system. And those corporations aren't somebody to dislike just on the basis of them being corporations. For-profit entities can benefit the wider ecosystem and do selfless activities. It's just that most often we find that they don't. Most often we find that these corporations are purely profit driven, and that's where the problem starts.
Yeah, because I totally agree with what's happening in the second. Sorry if I interrupt you, but you said before that you like the idea to have some conversation inside. Because in the second, if I remember correctly, in the second proposal of Uniswap, the Penguin Party voted for no. And I think this was a great idea because, in my personal view, the idea to have another airdrop only just for users with these specified dApps, there are Dharma, Edu, and so on, that was kind of a corporate capture thing. So if you are a big corporate, you can ask, and that was a very, very cool case. That means that something like Penguin Swap and something like your idea is very, very important to hear on Ethereum, in my personal opinion. That was a really...
Yeah, that was the whole original point. Yeah, the whole original point was that this giant corporation, Dharma, thought that they could come in and just change the governor contract within a couple weeks of the launch of Uni, and it was inappropriate. Those proxy contract users were totally deserving of the Uni airdrop as much as anybody else. I think that there should have been more campaigning in their interest. I tried to give Dharma the idea that maybe they should reformulate their request as a development grant, right? That they improve their integrations with Uniswap, and in exchange, then they get the Uni. And then the current Uni holders are at least getting something for their money. But it doesn't fundamentally make sense to take money out of the treasury and give it away.
Totally agree.
And after people have paid money, I mean, in the initial airdrop, it was a valueless token. But after it's already started trading for $8 a token, it's hard to come in and do a retroactive airdrop. And that was kind of the case right after the Dharma proposal. But I believe strongly, as more governance systems arise in Ethereum, so too will more protocol politicians and other decentralized political parties like Penguin Party. We have laid the groundwork for others to follow, not just in Penguin Party, but in DeFi Hub, in the metagame community, in the Uniswap community, and the future products will be based on what we're doing now. We are the pioneers that are pushing this forward, and we're still very early in this technology. And so I want to get into some of the lessons that I've learned as a founder and as a developer on this project, because I think that they will be helpful to other startup founders and developers. And the first most important thing I learned was that decentralization really is key. It's not a buzzword. It's extremely important in every aspect, not just in on-chain governance, but in control of things like news accounts, Twitter accounts related to the project. And a great example of this was that a developer named Ccomp dumped his fish, and as he did so, he destructed the dashboard that was used until that point for project management, which was our Codex account. That's where we were keeping up with all of the information on bug reports, all of our ideas, everything was there. And he did this inexplicably. It happened without any warning. It was totally disruptive to the project, both psychologically and physically. And I never expected that a developer would even want to do such a thing. Whenever possible, we should decentralize anything used in the course of our work to prevent situations like these, where one guy was in control of the codex, and we never expected him to, but he did, right? And that can have negative effects for the token holders. Shortly thereafter, Fish took a pretty hard hit in price, not just based on his dumping, but the psychological effect it caused on the project. And so I think that as a startup founder, you have to deal with good times and bad times. And the number one way to get rid of the bad times is just to decentralize from the beginning. Don't leave anything in a trusted system where you have to trust that somebody else is going to do what they're supposed to do. And there's a lot of things in our project right now that are just being run directly by me. I'm the one with the admin functions. I'm the one that's managing this kind of side account from the multi-sig treasury. And those are bad systems. It should not be dependent on me. It should be something more like a DeFi Hub token, where it's trustless, where it's computer code, where somebody doesn't have to trust me. They know that they have the right to vote and that vote is going to be followed. I think that the way that I've done things up until now with these very human governance systems like the snapshot voting and the multi-sig were very creative solutions that worked. They did work in the short term, and they allowed Penguin Party to just function very cheaply. But as the project gained seriousness, it should look into doing something like incorporating as a default, because that gives it trustlessness, that gives it that modularity where people can deploy these microservices and refine them and vote on them. And so that's part of my mission, is to keep pushing it forward until it doesn't need to depend on me, where it's something that just functions on its own. Like you guys said previously, it becomes an unstoppable, decentralized organization that's able to advance the goals of internet privacy and freedom and sovereignty. Another important lesson that I learned on this project was that developing software is about way more than programming. Developing living software requires that end users know about and use the software that developers contribute to. Contributing to the organization of a community is as valuable and labor-intensive, if not more, than developing the actual software. There are a lot of ways to look at this, but what I essentially mean is, not only does software have to be developed, it has to be marketed, it has to be tested, and it has to be modeled and analytically examined. These efforts take more of my time than the actual ideation and invention of new ideas, right? The actual development of Penguin Swap or our token contracts. I spend more time marketing it, dealing with the community, trying to keep up with news, attending conferences, attending the meetings, than I do actually developing the software, right? Because I'm trying to put on all of these different hats. I'm trying to be the guy that does the marketing. I'm trying to be the guy that does the news, and I'm trying to be the programmer. And those are different functions. That's a lot of different labor. So gamifying software development can't just be about rewarding the software developers. It has to be about motivating and incentivizing the community to ideate and to spread the word.
This makes me feel more appreciated as an unofficial Telegram moderator. So I like that thesis.
Yeah, and a great example is when the guys in the Uniswap Discord. So the guys in the Uniswap Discord are a totally unplanned, unpaid team, right? They're just guys that are passionate about Uniswap. They're the guys that kind of rose to the top in that Uniswap Discord as the guys to go to about, your questions. And I know that there's one guy, Mika, and he was kind of instrumental in assembling this support team for the Uniswap Discord. You guys are valuable. You guys are extremely valuable. Anybody that provides support for these tokens, explains what they do, how to use these products, that's extremely valuable. Customer service is the most important aspect of a business. I would say that the most important lesson I've learned as an inventor or an artist so far is that other people don't always see the vision. You have to make it real. Several times throughout this project, I would introduce an idea such as Penguin Swap to the other developers, and they didn't understand why I would want to build such a thing or what the relevance to the project was. I learned quickly that explaining the idea over and over again or debating the semantics of the idea doesn't work. Instead, as innovators, inventors, artists, and developers, what works is demonstrating the idea by building the minimum viable product before trying to explain the concept to end users or other developers. People aren't going to understand what you're talking about until they can do it, until they can use it, and until they can see it. Until then, it's just theoretical. But when users actually go to Penguin Swap and they can see it, then all of a sudden this concept becomes real. And you can pull up a trade, for example, SSJ tokens to unified stables. And this is going to do the trade directly through that SSJ to USD pair, which is the core problem we were talking about a few conferences ago of these vampire bots that prey on the preferential routing tokens. They prey on the tokens that aren't in that preferential routing array. And so by extending the array and having a custom interface for your community, you can get rid of that problem and allow your users to get the best trades. And I was inspired to create Penguin Swap because of the emergency, because I saw that this was a legitimate problem. And I get into that a little bit in my slides up ahead. But firstly, I would like to talk about the fish cycle. The governance token of a decentralized organization should flow out of the treasury to active contributors and back into the organization's treasury continuously. This creates a virtuous cycle and incentive alignment. It naturally balances the economy of the token. The token must flow back into the treasury, and sources of revenue for any decentralized organization must be found and utilized by decentralized organizations to accomplish this goal. What I really mean to say is that the simplest way to return value to stakeholders who believe in your project and provide liquidity or capital to your project is to execute a buyback of the token from them on a continuous basis. The reason for this is really simple. This method of distributing value, unlike a dividend, does not create a taxable event for the stakeholder. The taxable event is in their control to create when they exit a liquidity pool or sell the token for its then increased value. Whereas a dividend instantly declares your token to be an equity and for the dividend to be taxable income. And that creates problems for investors when it comes to dealing with their country's internal revenue services, tax collection services.
Yeah.
So how the Penguins met DeFi Hub was something I just touched on. I was volunteering as one of the moderator-like community members in the Uniswap Discord when I met the DeFi Hub team. This was during the emergency that DeFi Hub experienced. The DeFi Hub team tried to bring up the problem with the preferred routing pairs of Uniswap to the Uniswap team and the community volunteers of the Discord, and mostly this was dismissed within the Uniswap community. At first, I didn't fully understand the problem, but as I learned more, it became obvious to me that improvements to the routing logic were crucial to the development of Uniswap and projects depending on it like DeFi Hub. The immediate solution was simple: forking the interface and adding additional tokens to the preferred routing pair algorithm-based swap code. Penguin Swap was born. Starting out as a governance party for Uniswap, it makes sense for us to work on the Uniswap interface. Penguin Swap is our lovingly crafted fork of the Uniswap interface with various features such as extending the preferred routing list, including some of DeFi Hub's tokens like BIDL or SSJ or Unified Stable Dollars, to get our communities the best trades for their tokens. How it benefits the fish stakeholders is it generates potential revenue from swap fees if we use our own deployment of the router and we modify the logic a little bit. There could be exclusive features for fish holders that might be of interest to DeFi Hub communities. And as well, we get the obvious benefit of optimized trade routing for our community's tokens. I've had ideas such as a concept I call the fish net, which would be a network topology of Uniswap with manual pathing selection and limit order. And that's what I mean when I say that you could have these exclusive features, right? Like an order book built on top of Uniswap, or a manual pathing that allows every pair to be used and allows users to use their infinite creativity to come up with arbitrage that nobody else could think of. And it creates a game where people are looking at a map of Uniswap and they're trying to find the best trades live and against each other. I think that there are some very cool ways that we could be displaying the data for Uniswap that we aren't even really considering yet. And a great example of this is this code example from D3 called Marvel characters. So Marvel characters is a network topology of Marvel characters. You can click on Marvel, you can see that it opens these sub pairs, and you can imagine that these are different tokens and that the lines between be like liquidity pools. So you might have different tokens that are connected with each other, and then you might have them sized based on the amount of liquidity, and the connections between the tokens could be sized based on the amount of volume in that pair. And so you get this very immediate visual feedback of what the network looks like, what the different connections between tokens are, and what your actual route looks like on the map of Uniswap. I think that this solution to the routing problem is very simple. It's very simple in nature because it gives the users the ultimate tool to decide exactly how their trade executes. It removes the need for the algorithm at all by just making it manual. Short of re-architectures of the routing algorithm, this is probably the solution to make all of those routing pairs usable in the short term. And that frees up all of this currently existing liquidity that's in these non-preferred ERC20 pairs to actually be used by users.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of drawing close to the end here, but we're also working on ideas such as ways to beat the front-running bots. I've considered spinning up our own RPC nodes so that we don't have to depend on Infura if Infura has an outage. Those sorts of things that could be offered to our users exclusively to give them protection from front-running and better access to DeFi and Ethereum. A short overview of some of our governance tokens, because there's a few of them. It can be a little bit confusing even for our users. Penguin Party Fish, that's our internal governance token. It's a standard ERC20, which is used to vote on our snapshot space. We have Penguin Party Shrimp, which is a contract that allows Uni to be wrapped so that it can be liquidity pooled while still being voted for Penguin Party. It's a really cool concept. It's very simple in concept. It's just a contract that hands you an ERC20 for depositing Uni, and all of the Uni in that contract is delegated to one address. And so one shrimp is all on Uni and can be freely wrapped and unwrapped each other just like WETH. This generates voting power for Penguin Party. It can be held by the contract delegated to an address held by Penguin Party. As well, it generates revenue for Penguin Party in the form of a transaction tax that's applied on every transfer function call. Currently, that's set to 0.2% for the party, but it's a way of extracting value out of the liquidity pools to the benefit of the Commonwealth, to the mutual interest of the political party as a source of revenue. Similarly, we have Penguin Party Crab, which is a contract that allows Compound's comp token to be wrapped in a similar way. It has the same voting power and revenue features. And so that's a really simple concept, but it is freely usable by anybody. Anybody can take that same contract I've developed for wrap delegated Uni and comp. They can deploy it for themselves. You could have your own token that it represents your Uni or comp power, but it's still in a liquidity pool. So you're earning the fees from it, but also maintaining your governance power instead of having a one or the other type of situation, which I consider to be a flaw and an oversight in the way that it was developed. As well, I've kind of developed a few different experimental financial tokens and protocols. The first one was called Tori V1. That was a wrapped interest redirected ADI token. The interest-bearing power of the underlying ADAI is redirected even when in a liquidity pool to an address controlled by Penguin Party. Every Tory V1 wraps and unwraps to one ADAI V1. As well, transaction tax on every transfer function. It's the same 0.2%. And as well, I developed something I call Commonwealth Protocol. So this protocol is very similar to the unified stable dollar. It's a deflationary meta-stablecoin protocol that allows multiple V1 and V2A tokens, as well as other stablecoins and cryptos, to be freely wrapped and unwrapped into each other with zero slippage. There are plans to integrate the unified stable dollar and other non-dollar based fiat coins such as digital euros, won, yen, or other digital fiats we see as upcoming alternatives to the dollar, though we plan to initially focus on dollar-based tokens. I personally don't believe the dollar makes sense as a reserve currency for Europeans. It doesn't make sense as a reserve currency for Asian countries. There's no reason that the American dollar should be the world reserve currency. And I think that time is over. I think that it's imperative that we make that time be over because it gives America undue control over the world and the world's economic situation. And I tell you that as an American.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
For example, it is happening. For example, I'm in Europe, but I always think in dollars because running in the crypto space, everything is changeable in dollars. So you stop thinking in euro when you are in the crypto space. That's happened for all of Europeans here. So yes, it's a thing to solve. Yeah, totally agree.
And like you said about unified stable dollars, having multiple fiat coins that are one kind of stable coin protects the investors from failures in any one token.
Yeah.
If the US dollar fails or one of these fiats fails, then it can be removed from the system, and that portion of the contract might have been lost in terms of value in the protocol, but that wasn't directly passed on to the users.
So
it protected them.
It's kind of like the stability over the stability. So it's not just the stability over one fiat type, but it's a stability based on all the fiat type. That's interesting experimentation, I think. That's an interesting
definitely. The main thing that is left to be done before I consider V3 of the Commonwealth to be complete is an Oracle contract. So I want the Commonwealth contract to be separate and modular to an Oracle contract that controls the ability to set the weights for the wrapping and unwrapping of the various tokens. Basically, we require an Oracle that has some degree of prevention of manipulation, because I myself have fallen victim to an Oracle manipulation attack that happened on Compound on Thanksgiving, and I lost about $20 in that. These Oracle manipulation attacks have happened countless times, and they happen over and over again. So I think that there is more work to be done in that area.
I was a victim in Maker, so.
To the zero liquidation?
2 times. The first one because I was stupid, and I didn't balance my ETH with the DAI I took away, and the second one is during the early COVID period. So when the market crashed and there was no sync from the Oracle and the protocol. So yeah, I remember that very well.
It happens. And one of the painful parts of it nowadays in the Ethereum network, as opposed to the beginning of the Ethereum network, is when one of these kind of Oracle attacks happens, the gas price is usually like over 500 Gwei. It's usually extremely high. And so you as the person it's happening to, you have your hands tied behind your back because you just don't even have the ETH to rebalance the assets when it's happening. And I think the network has become very connected. It's not, I know we all complain about gas, right? It always seems like it goes up right when you want to transact, and it goes down right afterwards. It's almost like the Murphy's Law of gas, right? It's always fighting against us.
Yeah.
But I think that the network is about to go through this process of sharding. And this is one of the things I've been thinking about lately is, why aren't we using these testnet networks as actual networks? We just build bridge contracts between them and start bridging assets between these multiple Ethereum shards, right? Ahead of the beacon chain synchronization. We already have multiple Ethereum networks. You can spin up a Ethereum network pretty easily. What we need is more work done in these bridging contracts that can kind of bridge assets between the blockchains. I think that we could decongest the network a lot just doing that. And so I would love to see some work done in that area as well. Just kind of being casual and discussing some of what's interesting to me. I think sharding is the next step for Ethereum.
I'm optimist for optimism.
Yeah, well, and optimism is a similar concept, right? You have a plasma sidechain.
It's kind of like, yeah. And I think, I don't know, I'm just waiting for it. My personal view, everything will be both on chain and both or on this layer 2. So yeah, I think we will see a lot of things in the next months about these things, because all of the R&Ds are finishing up right now, and so yeah.
I agree. It's a really exciting time to be in Ethereum, especially with the launch of the beacon chain and Ethereum 2.0 finally starting to take shape after all these years. It seems like I've been telling people forever, just wait for Ethereum 2.0, right, and sharding. But it's finally almost here. So wrapping up, I hope fundamentally that Penguin Party can serve as a demonstrative model for how political party-like organizations can develop and protect protocols that have governance as a feature. The entire point of Bidling and open source software is that other people can improve upon the ideas that others and I have put forward and developed. And it is my sincere hope that some of the things I have helped push for encourage innovation, democracy, freedom, and sensible governance. Of course, I'd like to thank everybody here for their time. It's been my honor and pleasure to have a chance to speak here and to have had the chance to represent the common person in Uniswap governance. I'm a very personal person. You can always find me in the Uniswap, Penguin Party, Compound, and Depot Hub Discord chat rooms. I encourage anyone who's interested in what I'm working on to reach out to me by PM or in public. I'm always available to collaborate, debate, or give my input on something for the constituents I aim to represent in governance. I'd like to thank you, everybody, for coming. Happy holidays and biddle on, penguins. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you so much for your presentation, Matt. It was really, really interesting, very engaging. Okay,
Yeah.
I was captivated.
I appreciate that. I definitely am kind of a radical person. You know, I know that I'm a radical person with these radical philosophical, political beliefs. I think that we're fighting a revolution. This is a war for our money and for our freedom. And I think that we're winning this war. Every tool and project we're building in this space is pushing forward human freedom and innovating on governance.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because we are facing bad times outside of the blockchain. So yeah. So it's becoming more and more and more political to do things on chain than what was 2 or 3 years ago, but very, very more and more political.
Yeah, and I think that these things that are happening outside of here are influencing what's happening inside of Ethereum. And we've become increasingly worried about these regulators circling in on us, like with the Stable Act here in America. That affects people like me that might want to create something like Commonwealth, which is a stable coin by definition. Is the government going to require that I register with the Federal Reserve and reserve dollars to back my stable coin? These are real concerns that people in this space are having. And more we're feeling opposition to the government. And I think that people worldwide are experiencing this in the protests and riots and political violence we've seen all throughout the year have been evidence of that increasingly people are becoming polarized, but more and more they're afraid of institutions. They're becoming suspicious of the information they consume. And more we're looking for a solution. We're worldwide, everybody wants a solution to the problems of the world and the problems of the economy. And the solution is really simple. It's what we're doing right now. This isn't a bad time. And these changes that are happening worldwide are going to come to an end. And when they do, we're going to find ourselves in a new world. And we're going to find ourselves with new jobs. And we're going to find ourselves running new kinds of businesses. People will adapt and people will survive and people will help each other. Fundamentally, people are good and they will look out for each other. I don't think that there's anything to worry about. Mostly, it's the people that are losing control of humanity that are freaking out and trying to get everybody else to freak out, in my opinion. They want us to feel afraid of our neighbors. They want us to feel afraid to go out to the store. The media and the governments and the corporations are pushing this narrative deliberately to prevent people from doing what we're doing in Ethereum, uniting and overthrowing the current financial system.
I think I'm the only person in the ecosystem that I'm not afraid about these things, because I think that if you do things that are totally running by maths and on chain, I think you basically can have any kind of problems in political terms. So it's kind of the way that if you build free software or if you are something like a custodian or stuff. So I think they are going to be very, very strong against so for example, projects that are, I don't know, attached that can be attacked in some ways, like they have things in the real world and both on Ethereum and stuff, like I don't know, stable coins like Tether or this kind of thing. So that's my personal opinion when I read all the doc and things, because software is not, you can't stop software, and so
no, and that's why all of these things are happening worldwide, is because they know they cannot defeat Bitcoin. They can naked short it. They can open the Chicago Board of Mercantile Exchange and subsidize traders to take a loss to crash Bitcoin. It doesn't work. There's no amount of manipulation that can stop the deflationary currency from being more valuable than the fiat currency that is printed endlessly. And so it's just a war the central bankers can't win, even if it wasn't in terms of computer software, which is uncensorable and cryptographically signed and provable. These peer-to-peer networks, whether they're Napster or Bitcoin, are undefeatable. People can freely participate in torrenting or peer-to-peer streaming, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop that from happening, whether that's the Tor network or Ethereum.
Yeah. And Uh, can we check the Discord question if?
Yeah, I'll get it up.
Okay, you have already.
Hiturunk's on it.
Yeah, I'm quick.
So okay, we got some problem with DMs in this live.
Oh right, yeah. It's probably best if I don't do it again, unless I reveal Ali's personal information again.
So Menehune asks, first in the beginning, it sounded like Penguin would be developed as a default. I was wondering why it didn't become one, and what would Biddle 0.6 have to be the right choice, and what his thoughts are in making Biddle more used by other developers. This is an interesting question to me. I think that we have not quite reached the point where it makes sense to cross over from our current kind of governance model of doing things gaslessly through the snapshot space over to doing things like in a DeFi with these like on-chain, votes. I think that we're not far off from crossing over to there. And it's certainly doable at any time. The way that it would probably work is we would probably have to write a contract that would give you an equivalent amount of the DeFi token for your fish. So it would be like a wrapped fish.
Yeah, I think for these things, the 0.5 and especially the Unify things that we are working on, it will be very, very usable because as I remember from your presentation, you want to give people the right to vote when they add liquidity on Uniswap or these things, and that's are important things we are facing in the 0.5 and items under. So it will be very cool for you, all this kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think that the DeFi model is very cool. And I was a supporter and user of Aragon before they had a product, right? And from kind of the beginning of Aragon, I've had this perception of it that it's very clunky. It's very, it's not very changeable. It's not very dynamic. It's kind of,
it's kind of like
this DAO structure is very formulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and cost is a concern. I think that voting the proposals and executing them is going to become dramatically cheaper with version 0.5, right, Ali?
Yeah. That's another thing that.
Yeah, gas costs are extremely important to users right now, kind of during this period of time where Ethereum is very congested. And sort of like the early days of computing when we started filling up our first graphics cards and RAM and using up the processors to their maximum capacity, we went through a period before we reached the next processor architect, VGAs, where we had to optimize and really start looking at how we could be efficient in using memory and computer cycles. And we're doing that same thing in Ethereum right now. As the network has kind of gotten congested, we've started looking as developers at how we can make things more optimized and cheaper. And I think that that's going to continue going forward. Products like DeFi Hub are going to get cheaper and cheaper. And as sharding technology and optimism happens, the network's going to decongest, and we'll go back to a time when it's a couple Gwei per transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nick asked, would love to understand what attracted you to DeFos. I have an opinion of why we are better than DAOs, but I'd love your opinion, and why you decided to make Penguin Party one, knowing you said you'd be making it in the future. The answer to that is really simple, and I think that it's the whole value additive function of DeFi Hub, which is that you are actually voting on the code. right? This concept that you're going to vote on the code and that the developers can't claim this kind of exclusive power over the code is exactly why you choose to be a DeFi.
Yeah, that's
exactly right.
Not asked, what kind of strategy do you have in mind? A lot more uni voting inside the Penguin Party sub-DAO. For now, there is a total of $540,000 of uni power. What's your plan to at least reach 10 million voting power so the Penguin Party can propose a proposal? One of the first things that we developed at Penguin Party was an autonomous proposal factory. It was mostly just refactoring the one from Compound because Comp and Uni are functionally similar in their governance. Their fork, Uni is a fork of Comp. So we can propose a proposal without 10 million uni. It just requires that people delegate 10 million uni to it. But short of that, the real question is, what are we planning to do to attract liquidity to Shrimp? Shrimp is our main mechanism for kind of getting voting power. So I would say that liquidity mining is the answer. We would like to implement some kind of staking program for the Shrimp where fish are kind of distributed to people that are providing liquidity to that. And Vasa Power asked, according to this question, did you explore Codebase and standard microservices? Have you already started to try to create yours by your own? No, I haven't, but I would love for anybody that has, DeFi Hub to get with me to collaborate on our DeFi Hub token launch. Sure. Any kind of consultation I could get in regards to that, just totally welcome.
Yeah, sure. Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I think Ali's the same way as you described yourself, Hiturunk. He's a very open person, open to discussion and collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. Ali kind of reached right out to me when we first met up and kind of in relation to me launching Penguin Swap. And he's kind of what drew me into talking at DeFi Hub and kind of being more active in the DeFi Hub community. And I appreciated that. I think that that's really cool. That's the whole point of software development and open source software development, especially, is that, we can kind of bounce things off each other. I can look at his interface and he can look at mine and we can learn things from each other.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I will be happy to experiment something. So, and another thing is that I think there is a lot of things to do, not just in DFLs that we need to do together, like trying to figure it out a way to create a better version of Uniswap.info and all these things, because sometimes they suck. So so I think for some reasons, like one of the things that I totally hate in the ecosystem is the relying for information of tokens based on, for example, the Trust wallet. That is not about the money and the facto that you have to pay 6 BNB fee to be there, but it's de facto, yeah, because it's improved. So now it's 6 BNB. De facto that it's nonsense to have all of the information there, and it's I think there are a lot of things to do, like a better version of Uniswap.info that take metadata info if there are, or take better things. So there's a lot of development, and every kind of this development, not just in the DFO part, but to make Ethereum better in terms of decentralization, is better not relying on third party. I'm basically in, so that's the thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's so many things to work on in the meta game that it's infinite. We could do an infinite amount of different creations based on just the Legos we have now. And I think that it's rapidly accelerating. These protocols and pieces are all plugging into each other in really cool ways. Whether it's flash loans from Aave or A tokens or these governance tokens like Comp or Uni, they're all combining into really cool different pieces and Legos, like my wrap delegated Uni contract, right? It combines different elements of these other contracts into a unique concept. And that's the whole power of our movement and our technology. I think that things like the Uniswap fork that you've mentioned doing before, Alitoshi, I think that that's really important. I think that there are a lot of flaws in Uniswap.info. It works, you can look at our liquidity, but I think that this interface style of these very limited information that you get from these like lists of pairs. Like if I go to my own uniswap.info, it takes a moment to even load because I have so many pools. But there's so many of them that you can't contextualize this information into anything useful this way. In my opinion, it's really hard to. I've got 40-something liquidity pools. It becomes ridiculous to try and put this information into anything. There's no export to my spreadsheet button. It's not useful information to me at this point. It would be if I had a couple of liquidity pools. So displaying this information is something that's really important. And Sybil, like displaying the governance information, that's really important.
Yeah, because basically with something like uniswap.info, improved or things like that, people can start not relying no more in something like CoinMarketCap or all of these things that, because I think people are trying to give more attention about taxes other than taxes because they are more the reality basically, and so there is a lot of things to do there.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
I remember we spoke about it, Hiturunk. The Uniswap.info page doesn't only sometimes, not like efficiently or effectively convey information, but sometimes it actually misrepresents it as well. Like, based on, we think it was based on the routing system that was an issue with swaps as well. If like a token doesn't have like the majority of its liquidity with one of those 6 tokens, then Uniswap.info won't actually show how much liquidity it really has, at least on the token page.
Right. And we've definitely experienced plenty of that with our tokens. We've launched a few of them, whether it was fish or shrimp or crab. And you see these kind of different results in each one of them, especially as different, points of liquidity are reached. For fish, as an example, if I go to the liquidity page, you can see that there's, $9,000 of liquidity, which may be accurate. I'm not sure. But if you go to one of the other tokens like crab, there's not enough liquidity for it to make a determination about the total liquidity locked for that token, admittedly small. But I think that improvements are necessary for people to be able to come in and make a token and launch it and for it to get seen.
Yeah.
These sort of things.
We had people thinking that the SSJ token had done a rug pull because I'll get it up on the screen.
Yeah,
like
because if you don't track,
it's zero liquidity. But if you scroll down,
right,
it's all
I think in this case you. Sorry, Sidi. It was
Right.
so no, sorry.
I'm done.
Because for
But
example,
yes, that is a real problem.
this is a basic problem, and I think in a philosophical term too. Because, for example, if you track, like you tracking the routing, things that you choose, okay. The problem is that, for example, if there is new ideas or if there is a new product or new apps, it's very difficult to grow because this is becoming some kind of wall for people, and because not all of the people have the knowledge, are knowledgeable about the fact that how Uniswap work, how these things, technical term, works, and so I think Uniswap is very cool in one part, so that it totally opened Ethereum from the other kind of dApps architecture that was before, so selected tokens and all of this stuff. But there are tons of things to improve on the way. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Removing those walls is crucial. And, like you mentioned earlier, just getting your token logo registered can be a wall for new projects. In couple months since I launched Fish, and I still haven't gotten over some of those walls and getting our token logos up in places like the Trust Wallet. And
yeah. Yeah. So but before to finish this conversation, there are two questions that we have to rush them because we are late. So do you already ask on a migration from PP to DFO? I think this is a big tech question, and we can.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit. That the process will probably look like wrapping your fish for the DFO token.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly when the right moment to kind of do that migration will be, but I don't think it's far off in the future. I think that I'm aiming to do that pretty soon. The Treasury is worth enough money to justify getting rid of the security risk of having to trust the multi-sig to deal with that Treasury, and it's probably close to time to just move that over in the fee collection over to a DeFi to decide what to do with those fees that are being generated from the shrimp and crab transactions in the Commonwealth, and these kind of initial products that right now the revenue is not much, but in the future it could be, and it has the potential to scale. So I think that kind of lays out as much as I personally have figured out about it myself, that it is something I intend to do in somewhat soon. It just haven't gotten to the right point.
Cool. And the last question is, how will you describe Penguin Party to someone who is completely new into the crypto and wasn't and wants to get his head around the governance and Penguin Party in general?
That's a question. I like that question. The easiest way to think of it, political party, instead of electing a dictator or me fulfilling this exclusive role of managing all of the governance power myself, and there not being any checks and balances to ensure that I'm following the will of my voters. Instead, it makes sense to democratize it and to decentralize it and kind of turn it into a political party. So that's what it is at its core.
That's totally a cool idea, I think, to start talking about these things, because that's the future, and we have to help people to go in the right direction. And so I was very proud to have you here, and Thank you to joining us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Great speech.
No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me. I did stumble over my too many times. It's a little weird, my own echo, but I had a great time. I stayed up all night just to make it in here and chat with you guys about this.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime. I think the future holds bright things.